Hello, you're listening to Over the Oxer podcast with Tracy Cole for all things to do with the mind for equestrians. Welcome to this week's episode. Just before we start, a very quick plug for a little course that I'm running on the 19th of March. That's a Thursday. It's just the morning. It's 10 till 1. And it's all about mental anchors. And the course is designed for coaches and also for riders of any discipline, any level, anyone at all, because it's about how to set up some great mental anchors. So an anchor is when you see something, hear something, touch something, maybe taste or smell something, and you have a response. And we want to have good responses. So you want to see your bridle hanging up and think, oh, I'm so excited to ride. Or you pick your saddle up and you think, I can't wait to try out those new dressage moves. Or you see a particular show jump and you want to get over that jump. You're just so excited to know what it feels like to go over that jump. Usually, naturally, human beings set up a mixture of positive and negative anchors. So you might already be negatively anchored, because we all are. You might have a spooky corner and you're anchored when you see it, when you know you're coming up to it, then you start to feel a certain way. You might have a venue that you go to, and maybe when you see their arena or you see their the sign outside of the place, or maybe there's something else about it that you see a road sign that tells you that you're getting nearer, that you feel those nerves, or you don't feel particularly the most resourceful. So on the course, we're going to learn how to set positive anchors and also how to get rid of negative ones. So it's really cool, really nice little technique or set of techniques. I hope you can join us. It's only a few hours long. It will be recorded. So if you're in a part of the world where 10 o'clock UK time is completely inconvenient for you, then this is really easy to do, but it's better on a visual rather than on a podcast to do. So you can watch the recording, because, as I say, it's pretty simple. And as long as you can watch and take note of what's going on, have a little practice yourself, you will absolutely love anchoring. I'll put a little link to the course in the description box, or you can go on my website, tracycolenlp.com. Okay, that's the plugs over and done with. So today I want to talk about two very different styles of thinking. And these have come from two very different psychologists. Now, we're not going to get academic here, but I want you to kind of think about which camp suits you best. So it's not that one camp is better than the other, or that one set of techniques is so much superior. It's more that it depends how you're brought up, what your beliefs about yourself are, what your beliefs about yourself as a rider are. It depends what you value. It depends whether you're a glass half empty or a glass half full kind of person. It's just to kind of say to you, when you're looking on social media or on the internet and you may be researching what would work for you, or even these little podcasts, then you'll be able to say, do you know what, that's not my camp. I prefer the other side. I'm better if I do the other things. And so I just want to arm you with a little bit of information. But as I say, not heavy stuff. So the two camps then are from two psychologists, Carl Jung, who you might have heard of, and Alfred Adler. And so to decide, or to start to decide which camp you're in, the Jung or the Adler, then think about, where are your struggles, first of all? Is it in aiming for a goal? So you've got a goal and you want it. There are some blocks in the way. but you're going to get rid of those. Maybe you're not sure how yet, but, just get rid of them and you will be flying. Or do you think that you're not so goals oriented? You don't really set goals. And that when you think about riding, it's about unconsciously reliving something, going back to a past event that might have been to do with riding or something similar. And it's bringing back those old memories or those old feelings. It might just be stirring the feelings. Have a little think, because those are kind of like the two camps. So let's take Adler first of all. So Adler believed that every human being grows up with this fundamental of we start being little, we're small people, and we're less capable, and we might feel inferior. And he believes this happens over and over again in life. So you might have thought about this when you changed yard, or when you stepped up a level, or when you started riding, or at any junction. You feel a bit small, you feel a bit incapable or less capable, you feel a bit inferior. Don't feel traumatized. You don't think that you're damaged. You're just small. And from that smallness, he said that we start to think, well, I want to grow. I want to master this. I want to be competent. And for equestrians, it would be, okay, I can't do this yet. I want to be working at this level, but I'm not. And so I'm going to train. I'm going to get better. I'm going to find ways to get better. I'm going to refine my skills, and then I'm going to build on that. And so Adler said that ambition is quite healthy in human beings. It's good to have a goal. He said, the way people think in his scheme of things would be, let's say you didn't get a stride right. Then there's something to improve, maybe. There might not be. There might have been a different circumstance. But if you're constantly not getting a stride for a jump, then maybe it's improving your eye in terms of, what you can see and your judgment of distances. Or maybe it's something to feel for you. Or maybe it's hand-eye coordination. If you're flat work, let's say you feel quite weak. You know in your head where your legs and hands should be, but you can't quite do it. It feels quite weak. Then maybe you need to strengthen up. If you feel that you're behind other people, you can close the gap. That's your goal. And so Adler's way of thinking is quite empowering. So it says you're not broken, you're developing. And for many riders, this way of thinking helps them to be resilient, because they're saying, okay, I'm not there yet. And that yet is really important, but I will get there. I will find a way. But Jung would come in here and he would interrupt you and he would say, yeah, but what if it's not about improvement? What if it's about memories? What if the memories are your block? And Jung believes something that I think is a little bit more uncomfortable. But see if you like the Jung camp or that you feel more aligned with it. He said, nobody, not a single person, gets out of childhood unmarked. So everybody has something. Some people have very traumatic childhoods. Some people have a good childhood, but there will be times when they didn't feel good, whether they were bullied, whether there wasn't enough money in the house, and so they were there wasn't enough food, let's say, or it was difficult for the parents to pay the bills, or maybe something happened in childhood. They lost somebody very dear to them. So he says everybody has something about childhood that's not easy to get over. Not necessarily trauma, but emotional experiences. He also says, there may have been times when you felt completely unseen, nobody listened to you, where you compared yourself, maybe to a brother or sister or a friend. We also feel sometimes in childhood, particularly as we get to the end of childhood, that we're not good enough. Some people might have felt that love for them was conditional. And he said, in childhood, these things, we sometimes get over them. We come out of childhood, and for some people, they can push those things to the back of their head because they think, well, it's not happening now, or I'm bigger, I'm stronger mentally. They might not be thinking in these words, but, this is something that they feel, they've moved on. But Jung said these experiences don't disappear. They become the patterns that we live by. And this is relevant for riders because he's saying, the unconscious mind doesn't know the difference between, let's say, a parent or somebody who looked after you when you were a child, looking at you in a disappointed way for whatever reason. Maybe justifiably, maybe you'd done something wrong, or maybe you didn't do very well on your tests, and they're sitting in a parents' evening and being told that you didn't do very well, or you talk too much, or you don't study hard enough. So that disappointed look from somebody in childhood, and then when we receive a similar look, let's say from an instructor or a coach, or maybe a close friend even, and they're watching you, and you just, for a fleeting moment maybe, you just catch that similar look, and so your body reacts, and you get that same feeling, where everything contracts. The same, it might be shameful, or you might be disappointed in yourself. So Jung would say that when you make a mistake in your riding, you might overreact because you're not reacting as an adult, you're reacting as that child who once felt very, very exposed, very vulnerable. So if you receive criticism for your riding, maybe from a coach or a trainer, or you go to a clinic and it all falls apart, but you get this criticism, then it's not weak. It's not weak to feel really low, but it's because it's like touching an old wound. So for instance, when people go competing and they push themselves to compete and they push themselves to do better, and they get very, very upset if they don't. And it may not be that you're chasing that success or you're chasing rosettes, but maybe you're chasing something else. You're chasing the way that child would chase for parental or some other kind of attention. So Jung was very much into the inner child that remains in us throughout our life. And it's the part of us that he said it still has emotional needs, the emotional needs that you needed as a child. And that I'm sure he might agree that horses, because of their nature and because of riding and so on, that equestrianism brings out, sometimes quite brutally, but it brings out that inner child. It brings out our weaknesses once again. And so when your inner child feels unsafe, your body feels that tightness again. And you think it's to do with what you're doing in the moment. It's a training issue. It's a confidence issue to do with riding, but it might not be. It might be to do with your history. Okay, so you might agree with both. You might think, I'm a bit of both here, but it just helps you to kind of differentiate between the two. Okay, so which is healthier for riders? And that's a really big question, because if we have the inner child of Jung that still needs to be sorted out, then that might be something to go away and research, do some timeline therapy, do some inner child work. But I will say that Adler riders, it gives you a certain strength, because he says you can. You can improve. You can overcome it. You can rise above any weakness. And because he's so positive, it's not that he says, oh, everything's wonderful. He says, look, there are blockages. There might be a limiting belief, or there might be a fear, but you can overcome it with Adler, because that's what he says you can do. So he says the mindset is to build skill, and that will build momentum. Now, the problem with Adler, if you like, is that he does lead you to constant striving. You don't arrive, you constantly in that self-correction. Okay. But Jung, he might say, slow down, listen to what this reaction of yours is trying to tell you. Heal that inner child. Give that inner child the feeling of safety and protection and love. And he would say that gives you the emotional freedom. So which one works? I suppose it depends on the rider. Some people need that momentum that Adler gives them, and some people need that missing piece of the inner child work. Equestrian sport probably, at the moment, does lean heavily towards Adler. You can do it. Keep going. But wouldn't it be nice if we could mix in a little bit of Jung with that, just to address the emotional side of things? And as I say, you can look into this, you can look into timeline therapy, you can look into other styles of therapy, inner child work, and so on. So that part of you that we call the inner child, but, some people see a little mini me, but it doesn't have to be that. It can just be a part of your brain that's still holding on to these old issues. Then we could work through that, and then possibly quieten the self-criticism and the need to keep going. So next time you feel maybe a disproportionate emotional reaction, whatever it might be, frustration, panic, shame, overdrive, just pause. And instead of going into your Adler brain, because Adler isn't so emotional, go into your Jung style and say, how old does this part of me feel? How old does this part of me feel? And imagine that younger version of yourself. And tell that younger version that you're safe. This ride, this competition, it doesn't define us. We're just learning. And then when you've quietened that inner child, you could then bring in Adler to say, well, okay, let's improve. If we improve, let's say, the quality of our walk, the quality of our canter, then things will get easier. So maybe, in my summary, it's easier and healthier to think of using both sides rather than choosing a side. I suppose it depends on how emotional your issue is and how much you push yourself too much. So over the next week, have a think about how old the part of you is when you do come up against some kind of problem. Are you riding with that younger self? But the rider as a whole is the one who can hold the ambition in one hand and the compassion and the safety in the other. And I think that would be the healthiest of all. Thank you ever so much for listening. I hope this has given you some food for thought and maybe help to bring two sides of yourself together, or help you to see the other side of you that would help you to get even further with your riding. Take care, and I'll see you again really soon.